Hello and welcome back, and today I want to talk about Seagate hard drives, and I want to talk about the difference between not only their entire range, but when you want to choose a hard drive, be it for NAS, be it for surveillance, general data center use, even away from servers when it comes to using desktop PCs, different drives will promote different results. Today I want to talk through some of the details that surround a number of these different hard drive series from Seagate to help you decide which one best suits your needs. Now, it's worth highlighting that, as you can see on the screen, my laptop is here on screen because a lot of the time, a lot of the scripts for these videos, it's either in bullet point form or I have a whole general knowledge of drives to take in. But because this is such a widespread video and there's a hell of a lot of information to cover today, I'm going to need to have some of the reference materials right here in front of me. And I'll try to keep some of these on screen for you guys as well. But let's talk about the drives we're going to be featuring in today's video. First and foremost, probably the most familiar of them all, the Barracuda series. This is one of the earliest generation of traditional SATA drives from Seagate. Barracuda, typically, and again, there's going to be like kind of vague benchmarks here, typically designed for desktop PCs and single drive use. And for the most part, the most affordable drive of all the drive series we're going to talk about today. The drive I'm holding right now is just a 1 terabyte drive, but there are bigger drives, and I believe these go all the way up to 14, maybe even 16 terabytes currently. Moving on from that, we can talk about the one that we're most familiar with on this channel. I want to talk about Iron Wolf. Iron Wolf, or in this case, this is a 4TB Iron Wolf, but they're available on all the way up to 16 terabytes. And these are our NAS series of drives. These are drives that are designed to go inside network-attached storage devices. And these are the ones that we talk about on the channel the most because we talk about NAS the most. Look at the brands. Next, staying in the subject of NAS, we're going to talk about Freudian slip there, Seagate Iron Wolf Pro. And this Seagate Iron Wolf Pro is for larger NAS arrays that are going to be under a lot more pressure of utilization, and ones where, despite that huge overhead of performance and what's going on within the server at all times, these will still maintain a high read-write and operational value. And obviously they are going to be more expensive than the traditional drives, but we'll go in more details later on. Now, staying on the subject of servers, we can talk about a drive that is designed for a different kind of server these days. This is a surveillance drive. This is the Skyhawk series from Seagate, and these are the drives that you would put inside a NAS or DVR or NVR device that's going to have multiple drives inside, and its primary, if not only purpose, is surveillance. And there's lots of reasons why a surveillance drive inside a NAS is different to a NAS drive in a NAS, but we'll cover that a little bit more later on. And finally, we can talk about the data center class of drives. This is the Seagate Exos series, and the Exos series from Seagate are the drives that are designed to go in high-end data center use. They can, of course, much like all the other drives, be utilized in many other SATA-based drive appliances, but they come into their own when they are utilized in very, very busy server environments where you need high read-write operations, when things are going to be incredibly intense and the drives are being hammered with access at all times. So those are the drives that we're talking about today, and there is a huge amount of crossover between them. Now, first thing we're going to talk about is price. I did say that the Barracuda series is the cheapest by far, and that's sort of true, but because of the Seagate kind of demographic and the way the drives are spread out, the Barracuda series of drives, non-Pro, is only available up to a certain capacity. And once you reach a certain capacity level of drive, so I believe currently around about the 10 to 12 TB mark, Seagate Barracuda becomes Barracuda Pro, and then it stops being the cheapest drive of all of these at that capacity level at 12 and 14 TB. And that's because the Pro series version of this drive, you kind of need a more professional drive chassis to maintain the enormous amount of capacity within those drives, and alongside that, everything from the cache utilization with it to the drive build itself. And Barracuda Pro, that's why it's the price goes up more than just a simple 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 TB. Once they hit that Pro Series model and the way these drives are constructed together, things change dramatically. In actual fact, when you reach 12 and 14 terabytes, the lowest price drive amongst them, and if you do check this out, you might find that the Skyhawk, the surveillance drive, is the most affordable of all the drives here. And that is because it's designed for a single purpose, with the majority of the other drives that we're featuring here on the table being drives that are found in kind of more vague 2 or 3 task scenarios, whereas a Skyhawk surveillance drive is designed for surveillance and surveillance alone. And what that means is these are designed for a much, much heavier write action than read. What that means in real terms is a surveillance hard drive is designed to be ready to receive data as much as possible. It's designed to be used in a scenario where there's lots of cameras, and particularly modern AI cameras, which are pushing a hell of a lot of data to the hard drive for storage. Surveillance drives are designed to be written to significantly more than they are to be read from. What that means in basic terms, they are designed to have cameras write and send a bunch of camera footage for, minutes, hours, days, weeks and months, but that data is only going to be accessed very periodically, probably less than 5%, and that's being generous. Think about if you've got a camera outside your home or business. Chances are that camera is going to be recording for days, and you probably watch mere minutes, fast forwarded even, of the data that's on those disks, and you still need the drive to continue being recorded to. So surveillance drives are designed for far bigger write actions than read, and that's the distinction, and that's why their price is more negligible than the others, because whereas every other drive on this table can be used for lots of purposes, effectively, the surveillance drive is very targeted with a narrow field of utilization. Now, the NAS hard drives here, both the standard and the Pro, are both with the same utilization, but a slightly different method. So the standard drive, which is to be utilized in hard drive RAID arrays of around 5 to 8 disks, and that is a little bit negligible. It means that you can install a standard IronWolf NAS drive in a NAS server of up to 5 to 8 disks, and it will function very, very well indeed. But its construction is not designed with more enterprise utilization, such as a 12 bay, 16 bay, or a 24 bay rack mount in mind. The result being, if you have multiple of Seagate IronWolf standard NAS series drives in a much, much bigger array, they're not going to perform as well as they should. And that's because of the vibration sensors, the heat sensors, the RPM and stuff like that, and the cache not being geared towards that larger enterprise field. Now, the drive itself arrives with three years of manufacturer's warranty, and unless you get to about 10, maybe even 8 terabytes, the majority of them arrive with 5900 RPM. That is then up to 7200 RPM, all the way up to 16 terabytes, with the cache inside starting at around 32 to 64 meg and getting up to about 128 to 256 megabytes of cache. It also arrives at that 3 years manufacturer's warranty and Seagate IronWolf Health Management inside, something I'll talk about in a little bit more detail towards the end of the video. But the Seagate IronWolf NAS drive is still a very, very, very good drive, but once you go into those bigger storage arrays, once you're going to be really pounding that NAS to read and write as much as you might need to in an enterprise level setting, that's when the Pro Series crops up. Now, pretty much all Pro Series drives arrive with 7200 RPM as the speed inside. On top of that, the cache is significantly higher at each tier. And although the Pro Series is clearly more expensive than the non-Pro, the price between Pro and non-Pro is only about £30 to £50 with each tier, and it's actually at the top tiers that the margin of difference between Pro and non-Pro gets less. It's only at the lower tiers where the price is quite large, and that's because the larger tiers of non-Pro are still built quite enterprise level. The construction of the chassis, the RPM, even the cache is heightened to a point that the price of production is a little bit closer, only in terms of hardware construction, with a Pro Series drive. But there's still lots of reasons why the Pro Series, rather than the non-Pro, can be an optimal choice for business, notwithstanding the fact the device arrives with 5 years of manufacturer's warranty, not the 3 of the non-Pro. And along with the caching options and, of course, the Iron Wolf Health Management, that again I will talk about at the end, the Pro Series drive also arrives with 2 years of data recovery built in. So and again, we did some whole overview tests of this. If your drive suffers mechanical failure, if you lose data that you need to recover, or any one of many ways in which you can lose data within a disk, chances are it will be covered by the data recovery plan included with this drive. And anyone that's ever had to use enterprise level data recovery will tell you it costs you thousands upon thousands of pounds to claim literal bits of data. So that's one way in which Pro Series, particularly Pro NAS series drives, are very advantageous. And of course, unlike these drives, which are designed, the non-Pro, for around 5 to 8 disks, the Pro Series will go to 16, go to 24 bays. It is designed for the long haul with vibration and temperature sensors, as well as increased data writes per day in comparison to the non-Pro series. Something we'll touch on a little bit more later on. So where does that leave us? That, of course, leaves the Exos series. And the Exos is kind of the big data center class drive. Weirdly, they've found a great price point with the Exos series because although it is an enterprise drive that is comparable in a number of ways, cache, RPM, warranty, construction, with that Seagate Iron Wolf Pro, it doesn't arrive with the data recovery services. And somehow in that, the price of an Exos can sometimes be less than that of a Pro because of the way they've kind of scaled and what's included on a physical and software level between these drives. Now, don't get me wrong, the Exos series still gives you probably the best read-write performance of any disk here on this table, although the Pro will sometimes come very close, or at some capacities even surpass that of an Exos. But remember that an Exos drive is still designed for a data center. It probably consumes the most power of all the disks here on this table. Let's go to the laptop. If we make our way to power consumption, we can see immediately that of all the drives on this table, at the 14 TB limit, the Exos consumes the most power at well over 10 watts. And think about that, at 10 watts at the Exos, moving all the way down the table to 6.8 on the standard NAS drive, that's a huge area of difference. And I know it's still not much power, but once you're looking at a device that's got 10, 20 drives, and you think of the heat and the vibration that's generated from a drive, it's worth highlighting that. And the more goes from that, that power increase is on everything from standby to active utilization and idle. And hopefully we've got some graphics there on screen to show you. Now, on top of that, we can talk about the max read write, because let's face it, a lot of us want to talk about bare bones read-write operations, and unsurprisingly, the performance of the Exos, as mentioned, is the highest of them all. Looking at it here, we're looking at 245 megabytes per second write on this drive, which is great. That's half an SSD, which is pretty fantastic. And if you compare that against the 196 of the standard Barracuda, that's a big jump in performance between these drives. And once you aggregate those drives in a RAID array, that's when you really see the performance benefits, and particularly if you're going to utilize 10 gigabit and stuff like that on your array. And it's also worth highlighting that the Barracuda drives are not designed for RAID. They are not designed to be in multiple arrays of multiple Barracudas all working together in a random array of independent disks. RAID. They don't have the vibration sensors. They don't have the cache built in together to deal with data that's being spread across multiple drives at once. It's one of the main reasons why people moved out from Barracuda from the early days when people were sticking these inside NAS, because they were using the wrong tool for the job. Now, across all of these drives, as mentioned, we do have distinct price differences between them, but there are other ways to gauge a drive, because if you're going to buy a hard drive, it's not just about how fast you can write data to it. It's about, you know, the capacity of the disk and what it can hold. Because at the moment, all of the Seagate spectrum of drives are available at 14 and 16 terabytes, with some great options available. But in terms of failure rate, in terms of reliability, in terms of basically robustness, it has to be said that when you spend a bit more, you do seemingly get a great deal more reliability and robust build. If you look at the Backblaze listings, that are published periodically, you will see that Pro Series drives typically have much higher reliability. Don't get me wrong, those numbers are a little bit suspect, because it's not like they use 500 or 1,000 of every single drive. You are looking at percentage figures that, they're open to interpretation with bad matches or the devices they're in, and there's lots of little niggly points there. But overall, you do see a much higher mean time between failure the more across this table you go, with 2.5 million at this end of the table and 1 million MTBF at this end of the table. So it does grow in line with the price. And the same thing goes with data writes per day. You can definitely write more data per day on the enterprise level drives and flush that data and rewrite. And that's not just in terms of the speed at which you can write it, but the robustness of those platters inside to take that data and the ARM and everything involved inside. One disk that we don't have on the table, for example, because they're still not commercially available, is of course those Hammer Mac 2 drives with the two actuators working inside alongside the ARMs reading twice as much data, with read and writes being reported at around 480 megabytes per second. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they look like, because I thought we kind of maxed out drives in terms of capacity, to be honest, and I thought we should concentrate more on speed rather than capacity. But the Mac series seems to be giving us both, currently available in 14 and 16 terabyte versions being planned. Now, we talked about our RPM, we've talked about caching, we've talked about price, we've talked about utilization. Let's wrap things up on what is the best drive on this table, because let's be honest, they're all going to have a utilization. So technically there is no best drive on this table. We can't look at them and go, oh, that one. But what we can do is see which ones of these drives tick the most boxes. I mean, if we look at home NAS users, small prosumer, your 4s and your 6-bay devices, chances are you are going to do well with standard NAS drives. You definitely shouldn't go for a Barracuda as described earlier. But if we look at, for the small to medium NAS user, someone that's going to spend around somewhere between $1,000 to $2,000 on a complete solution with hard drives in a RAID and a 4-bay and above, we can look at these four. We can kind of lose the Barracuda from the equation. The Skyhawk, obviously, if you're using a device just for surveillance, go for the Skyhawk. You need that heavy write, low read action. But even if your device is going to be surveillance and one other task, go for the Iron Wolf, because Skyhawk, if you're using it for other things than surveillance, those other things will suffer dearly with a heavy write, low read return on operations with that disk. Now, between the Iron Wolf and the Iron Wolf Pro, there is a school of thought that even if you are using even a 2 or a 4-bay NAS, you should go straight for the Pro because of the data recovery, because of the increased RPM and caching and the increased read and write speeds, as well as the data recovery service that are included inside. But do bear in mind that one of the things that the Barracuda has that very few of these other drives have is a low noise threshold. Of these drives here, the Seagate Iron Wolf here is the lowest noise of these 4 drives, and these drives here are the noisiest of the bunch. And if you're going to be in close proximity to a NAS, you're not going to want to go Pro, because it will drive you close to madness. So you do get a lot of value from that, but remember that word, enterprise in terms of construction. Remember the robustness of the design and the heavy nature of its design. Even when looking at the weight of these disks, we can see that the Barracuda drives weigh in significantly less at 14 TB than that of the Exos, and because of that enterprise level construction. So for NAS users in the small to mid range, sure, Iron Wolf Pro, there's your money. But what about higher? If you're going to go into an 8-bay or above, it opens the door to choose between a Pro drive and an Exos. And from here, it simply comes down to 2 things. One, are you going to utilize the data recovery services or have contingency plans in place already that you don't need it? In that case, if you do, go Exos. You'll get a better value for money per terabyte, and you still get an incredibly robust, strong drive overall. However, if the appeal of that increased coverage of the data recovery, because both of these drives are 5 years of warranty, but if the inclusion of the data recovery services appeals to you. If you're not that bothered about MTBF, but you are interested in things like data writes per day and a more balanced read-write operation, then maybe the Pro for you. And that's what it comes down to. It's about buying a hard drive that you're getting the most performance out of and robustness, because all of these drives will give you, including the Barracuda, will give you a great read and write, and you are going to get a good drive that is going to perform in a multitude of different ways. But the more work you're going to do to the disk, the more you need to have a disk that's prepared to take that work. And that's why we're moving this way along the table based on just how much work you're going to do. Now, we are going to do a follow-up series of drives with this, videos where we're going to bench test each of these drives at the same capacity level in similar scenarios. This is going to take something like 5 weeks to get all that recording done. So do bear in mind, it may take a little bit longer than a simple week or two, but I will get that done for you guys. If you've got any questions or stuff that you want to see in that video, or maybe some scenario and comparisons that could be tested logically, do let me know in the comments. And don't forget to click like if you've enjoyed this video, so I know that you do, and I know how to keep going forward, and click subscribe to learn more. I'll see you next time.